So you want to go to Finland. Well, before you go, you might want to know a little bit about the country's history. It was under Swedish control from the 12th century to 1809, and from 1809 to December 6, 1917, or Finland's Independence Day, it was under Russian control. It remained neutral during the Cold War despite its close proximity to Russia, and it's closely connected to other Scandinavian countries, sharing labor markets and participating in joint projects. It became an official member of the EU in 1995, with Helsinki as the capital. Nature is extremely important to the Finnish culture, since two-thirds of the country is covered by thick woodlands. It's the most densely forested area in Europe. Art has a deep connection to this nature-filled country, with typical literature and artwork having many references back to the beautiful landscapes that this country provides. Most of the population lives in the bottom third because the top two-thirds is very inhospitable. It has 56,000 lakes, one of the most lake-filled countries on the globe, and its formation was largely dependent on massive glaciers, which means that the country now is rising by 0.4 inches per year, as now that the glaciers are mostly gone and there's less weight on the land, it can start rising up again. In terms of its government and society, it's a mostly free enterprise system with some nationalized industries. There's lots of power from hydroelectric dams. The technology sector is very large. It's a big part of where the money comes from. The government runs free hospitals, and the prices of private hospitals are limited. Sauna baths are also an extremely big part of the culture, and almost everyone participates in. Life expectancy is high. Summer houses are also very common, where Finnish families will have a house in the woods to go to during weekends and on holidays. Midsummer is one of the biggest celebrations, which happens on the longest day of the year, and it involves music, dance, bonfires, and excursions to the summer houses. And to literally no one's surprise, their national sport is cross-country skiing. But if you really want to connect to Finland's nature, what you really need is rally racing. As a certified Finnish man, I will teach you the fundamentals of this great motorsport. The first thing you need to know before anything else is pace notes. In any rally event that involves one car on the track at a time, the driver will have a co-driver that spits out numbers from 1 to 6. 1 is a very tight turn, while 6 is a very flat out turn, and this tells you what the road ahead will look like, as it might be obstructed by trees or rocks. A square turn is basically 90 degrees, and a hairpin is basically 180 degrees, or a U-turn. Some special pace notes or phrases that you might hear are narrows and widens, which refer to a change in track width. Overcrest or dip, which refers to a part of the track that is especially curvy. don't cut, which refers to some sort of rock or something that you could potentially hit being at the apex or inside of a corner, so you're not supposed to try and cut it at all. Distance refers to, or you might hear like a number, and that's the distance between a tone that you heard before and the next tone after that, and that can be used to signify really long straightaways. As an introduction to the basic topics you're going to need to know for rally racing, when people think of speed in racing, they often are referring to top speed. This is a very misleading way of thinking about racing, as the car with the top speed often will not get the best stage time, because what's incredibly important in racing is managing momentum through a turn. You want to keep as much speed as you're going through a turn. Top speed is not important, it's keeping that speed. This is why many beginners are directed to the phrase slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Additionally, corner exit speed is significantly more important than corner entry speed. You don't want to try and enter a corner at the fastest speed you can go. You want to exit it at the fastest speed you can go. Keep in mind that you have brakes for a reason. This is not Mario Kart. You cannot plant your foot on the pedal the entire time. That's not how this works. Listening to your co-driver is also very important. You can't ignore them. You need to know what the road in front of you is going to look like. When you're practicing a course, ensure to start slow and slowly build up speed. If you start fast, you might build bad habits, when if you start slow, you'll start seeing how you can conserve momentum, and you'll start understanding weight transfer, which I'll discuss next. Before we get into weight transfer, I'd like to establish the meaning of the words oversteer and understeer, which I will use throughout this video guide. Oversteer refers to when the car angles more than what is required for the turn, while understeer refers to when the car angles less than what is required for the turn. You typically want a little bit of oversteer. Weight transfer refers to how weight shifts around the car, and it's very critical to have an understanding of this topic in rally racing. When you brake or slow down, the weight of the car due to inertia goes to the front wheels. This is better for cornering, which means that you should try and end your braking zones or the period in which you're braking right as you hit the apex of a turn, because this will maximize the benefit you get from putting the weight on the front tires. When you accelerate, the weight goes to the back. This means that you can't really turn in while you're accelerating. This is why many rally drivers use a strategy called feathering the throttle, which is when you blip the throttle, pressing it down and then releasing it, pressing it down and then releasing it, instead of pushing it all the way down, because this allows the car to coast, keeping some of the benefits that you get from braking. Turning will put the weight on the outside wheels of the car. If you quickly switch directions, this weight will switch to the other side, causing a flick. This strategy is very, very famous in rally racing and is often referred to as a Scandinavian flick. Keep in mind that the Scandinavian flick can also be your enemy. If you start fishtailing on a rally course, and you try and correct by steering in the opposite direction of where you're rotating, you might overcorrect or be too aggressive, causing a spin. If you're losing control, especially when you're starting out, it might be better to just slow down instead of counter-steering, even if that results in some lost time, because you would lose a lot more time if you spun all the way around. Referring to sliding, this is not drifting. However, in rally racing, you do want a little bit of slip angle. Slip angle can be defined as the difference between a turn's angle and the car's direction. You should be starting rotation well before a turn because of how low the grip is on most rally stages, and this is part of the reason that pace notes are so important. It is critical for you to understand that slip angle is not drifting. For it to be a drift, you would have to continue the angle of the car past the apex of a turn. In rally, you typically want to straighten out after a turn rather than keeping angle in the car, unless if you're preparing for a flick into the next turn. What I'm referring to there is if there's multiple very tight turns, it can be beneficial to flick from one to the next, where you create angle going into one, keep that angle, and then flick it back into the next one, and you can kind of basically fishtail but in a fast way. I will now walk through one of my runs of Finland and give you tips on how to survive the Finnish experience. So we're going to get started real quickly. What you're going to notice is that we're going very fast and there's a lot of jumps in this course. In fact, you spend around half of your time in the air. So what you're going to want to do is if you hear a turn, or you hear the co-driver say a turn's coming up over crest, you have to point the car in that direction as you go over the jump. Also, maybe let off the throttle a little bit when you're doing that because you might need to recorrect like I just did. Now, remember your lessons about the flicking, okay? You're going to see some flicking happen very soon of using weight transfer to our advantage. Right here I break up to the apex so that I can get that good front weight turn in. I go to the right, keep going to the right. I brake a little bit here. And then I'm going to flick it a little bit there. You saw I turned a little bit to the right and then I turned to the left. And it created more rotation. We're going. Things are going pretty well so far, if I must say so myself. This part's a little scary. Don't be afraid to slow down if you start fishtailing. Remember to point in the direction after the turn as you go over the crest. It's very common in Finland. Don't do what I just did there. That would most likely end in your demise. So here I feather the throttle a little bit. Of course you'd be hearing call-outs as well, but I have the co-driver turned off for this demonstration. A little bit of a flick there, using that fishtailing fast strategy I talked about. And now you're going to see a very good example of a Scandinavian flick coming up very soon. Here we go. I turn left. I get it to the right. Created some rotation to get through that turn, which is probably, I think it was a right 3 or a right 2. That is a great example of a turn where you need to position the car as you go over the jump. That's very, very common in Finland. This really is the Finnish experience. You might need to practice this a few times before you do it in real life, because I'm not even going to explain why. So we're almost done here. This is a very short course. And I hope you enjoyed this introduction to the Finnish experience, Finnish culture, and the country I so dearly love as a authentic Finnish man.